Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering federal workers panic, angered, upset, and fearful of the government purge. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. I don't like to see people upset. I don't like to see people stressed out and tortured. But the government workers need to understand that they work for the executive branch. And the executive branch is run by the president. He's the boss. He will decide what you do on your job and what you don't do on your job. Yes, you may have civil service protections depending on your position in the government. But no, you and your friends don't get to decide what you want to do every day. You're there to do a job, and you need to do it the way the president says to do it. But not everybody actually wants to do their job. From the Federalist, federal employees angered and fearful at having to do what their boss says. And from the New York Times, for stunned federal workers, sleeplessness, anger, and tears. One thing lost in the Trump administration's war on the federal bureaucracy is the collective voice of the employees, but some have begun to speak out. If you're familiar with Reddit, you can check out Reddit's Fed News subreddit. These are some pretty crazy posts on here, and I do check them out from time to time. Not everybody on here is posting in crazy ways and making you wonder, like, do you guys really believe these things? Are you guys for real? And the answer is about 98% are this way. So people just basically need a wake-up call because you work for the federal government, which means you work for the people. The people are your boss as directed by the President of the United States. Civil service protections means you have certain rights if you get fired. It doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. And those rights that you have in no way give you the position that you can do whatever you want in your job, or you can use your discretion without the approval of your superiors. And your ultimate superior is the President of the United States. Confusion and anger, fear and chaos, disruption across the federal government. How dare the president? Federal employees and their trusted champions in the corporate media are incensed by the new administration's actions directed at them. Quote, federal employees confused, angered by Trump's offer to quit, read a February 1st CNN report. We didn't even get to that one. From fake news CNN, federal employees confused, angered by Trump's offer to quit. The offer to quit is subversive in and of itself because he's told the entire staff, with very minimal exceptions, but the entire federal workforce that they're welcome to retire because essentially they're not needed. That undermines them, I'm sure, to no end. Quote, fear and chaos grip federal workers as Trump rapidly remakes the government, declared NBC. Trump's revenge targets feds, expands his power and disrupts government, warned the Washington Post. Perhaps those among the committed left can muster the appropriate pearl clutching regarding a legitimately elected president exerting control over an executive branch that falls within his constitutionally defined authority. But for the rest of America, it's hard to generate much outrage over Trump doing precisely what he said he would do during a 2024 presidential campaign in which he won both the popular vote and the electoral college. Superficially, it's easy to appreciate why the new administration's disruptive actions over the last few weeks are being pegged by the left as radically dangerous. They're freezing foreign aid to millions of people around the world in desperate need. They're cruelly offering a buyout to millions of federal employees. They're ending remote work opportunities. They won't be able to hire young people. They're going to eliminate the Department of Education and its $4 billion budget that provides essential services to millions and millions of American school children. Voters can be forgiven for getting a bit worried. Shut down USAID overseas missions that do good around the world? Isn't it a bad idea to cut the size of the federal workforce by 10% or perhaps even more? Don't we need a 3 million strong federal civilian workforce to perform all kinds of basic services? Won't American civilization, as we know it, simply grind to a halt without the current staffing of these federal agencies? At least that's the narrative of the Washington Post. While it's true that the federal government does indeed provide lots of essential services to American citizens, for example, agencies focused on national security, the U.S. Postal Service, Veterans Affairs, Federal employees, as a professional demographic, are also the most pampered and insulated workforce in our nation. And if you're not sure about that, go onto Reddit, go to r/Fed News, and look at what these people actually say in their own words. Federal workers get more leave than private sector employees and generally work fewer hours. Federal employees enjoy unparalleled levels of legal protection from being fired, protections that were strengthened during the Biden administration. Unlike non-federal workers who could be fired at will, federal workers can only be fired for cause, a process that includes a step-by-step action plan. For example, to be fired for poor performance, the employee must be first presented with a negative performance review, something that typically takes a year. Then, the employee is placed on a performance improvement plan, a PIP, in which he or she has to meet regularly with their supervisor and discuss how things are going. Poor performers can be fired only if they fail to improve. Even marginal improvement is good enough to get off a PIP. Given how time-consuming this is, many supervisors prefer to simply pass the trash, waiting until they or the employee change offices. Then there's the incredible amount of freedom federal agencies have to operate independently of the guidance and directives of the president and his appointees, unaccountable to voters in their decision-making or use of taxpayer dollars. The interagency, a process by which federal organizations meet to work through executive decisions, acts as an incredibly effective tool to slow and obstruct the executive power of the president and the meager 4,000 appointees he's allowed. Many federal employees are anonymously telling corporate media how mistreated they have been by the new administration's many directives, how deeply insulted they feel by the administration's aggressive, seemingly mean-spirited character. They can't believe an elected president would seek to exert this kind of influence over them, demanding they align their work with his policy priorities or face being sidelined or even terminated. Former Department of State employee Chuck Park, in an op-ed for the Washington Post, bemoans that the president, quote, has two hands firmly on the steering wheel. His administration is moving with intention, not abandon. Federal employees must not violate their consciences, Park urges. This outrage reflects such a lack of self-awareness and tone deafness, it's hard to take seriously. As diligently cataloged in such works as John Marini's Unmasking the Administrative State, Joseph Postel's Bureaucracy in America, and most recently Adam Lovinger's The Insider Threat, the federal administrative state for decades has been given incredible latitude to pursue its own agenda based on supposed expertise, an expertise that is demonstrably liberal in its political orientation. And its proceduralism is purposely Byzantine in order to make it more difficult to dismantle. As Marini aptly observes, James Madison never would have predicted that the federal government itself, rather than just groups of like-minded citizens, would become a faction. These federal government employees have their own power base, especially working collectively. But they're not supposed to be like their own branch of government. There really is no such thing as a completely independent agency independent of the executive branch. There's Congress, there's the judicial branch, and the executive branch. That's it. There isn't also, well, what about the Justice Department, and what about the FBI, and what about these other independent agencies that get to do their own things and make their own decisions based on their own professional advice? No, it doesn't really work that way. And the Supreme Court has already made that clear. And there are multiple lawsuits going on now trying to block Trump from being essentially the president of the United States and not allowing him to run the executive branch or make certain decisions. The lawsuits will come. The lawsuits will go. The Democrats and the establishment will overreach because they're too crazy, they're too greedy, and if it's a small issue, Trump won't even care. But the issues are getting bigger and bigger, and they are finding some judges by doing what's called judge shopping. They go around to this judge or that judge in that state who they know is going to agree with them, and the judge goes overboard. All of that's going to wind up getting reversed. And when it does get reversed, it'll create a precedent that Trump can use that will give him the most clear, broad definition of what the executive's power is, and it will prevent them from bringing these kinds of lawsuits in the future. And if it's even conceivable, Trump will get to be even more aggressive at that point and really actually fix the federal government. That final battle where they overreach with their lawfare and then Trump knocks it down actually does have to happen for Trump to finish his work fixing the federal government. Even more alarming, The plethora of agencies encompassing that government have been allowed to perform executive, legislative, and judicial functions, also unconstitutional. Surely federal bureaucrats are not so ill-informed as to not know their accountability to the American people is mediated through the executive branch, namely the president. Even the aforementioned piece by a former state employee acknowledges as much. That their president, the executive, is taking admittedly dramatic steps to exert control over them may be uncomfortable and even insulting, but it shouldn't be surprising, especially given how much resistance they offered in Trump's first term. The outrage of federal employees to that effort only proves how deeply the left's ideology defines the mentality of so much of a disproportionately liberal federal workforce and their day-to-day work. In their minds, they can't separate the missions of various federal agencies from liberal political ideology. That sounds like all the more reason to rein them in. They do not like being demonized. Quote, "We are being demonized. Federal workers grapple with a demoralizing assault." And why do they have to be demoralized like this? It's not nice to demoralize people, but when you're at war with them, you kind of have to demoralize them. If you can demoralize them, you can defeat them. And if they would just follow the directions of the actual elected president of the United States, this would not be an issue. But we know they didn't before, and we know they won't do it now. As an engineer with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Michael Garrett says he's always known that he could double his salary in the private sector. But when he became a federal employee over a decade ago, Mr. Garrett was thinking about more than money. Quote, "I chose the federal government because of job stability and to have a healthy work-life balance," says the engineer, who, like other federal employees, asked to remain anonymous so he could speak candidly. Beyond the personal benefits, he had a sincere desire to serve the greater good. Quote, "I felt like I could make a difference." And okay, so he could have made money in the private sector, even more money in the private sector, but he wanted to work less hours. He wanted better benefits. Well, that's actually additional compensation. So he took advantage of the opportunities in the federal government because they were better for him. He preferred to work less and to have better benefits. But now he says bluntly, all that is being ripped away. In place of job security and patriotic pride, government workers like him are experiencing nothing short of chaos. In just a few short weeks since coming into office, President Donald Trump and his new Department of Government Efficiency, led by billionaire Elon Musk, have upended the federal bureaucracy and with it, the lives of more than 2 million federal workers. Following through on a campaign promise to drain the swamp, with a stated goal of slashing as much as $2 trillion from the U.S. budget, Mr. Musk's team has moved with a speed and ruthlessness that has left the federal workforce reeling. Many say they feel they're being treated unfairly, even villainized for jobs that have never been lucrative or easy. Quote, "Many of us have had offers to go to the private sector," says a U.S. Treasury employee. "We chose not to because this is how we've decided we can best serve our country. And we want to serve our country. And we're kind of being demonized. We're being made out to be an enemy." Now, I don't know who that person is in the U.S. Treasury, but there are a lot of problems going on in the U.S. Treasury. Elon Musk has told us by tweet, and I haven't seen anything contrary to it. And to me, it sounds like it could potentially be criminal. People not checking payments that are supposed to check payments. Payments going places that they're not supposed to be going. Insufficient record keeping to say like what a payment is for when you're actually sending the payment out. So they take payments in, they don't make sure they're valid, and they don't even have notes on a lot of these payments to say what the payment is for. They just say, send the money out. And these guys just send the money out. I'm not saying that that employee at U.S. Treasury was doing anything wrong, but without this review that DOGE is doing of the U.S. government, we would have never known about this stuff. And it must get addressed. Quote, "Before the inauguration, we thought DOGE was a joke," adds a U.S. Food and Drug Administration employee. Quote, "But it's not funny at all anymore." Yeah, it's not that funny. We want results. The United States of America elected a president to get into government and clean things up. We don't like the inflation. We don't want to hear that our money is being wasted, and we don't want to hear that payments are being made in the millions upon billions of dollars, and no one's even checking those payments. Anyone who's worked in a business environment before knows you have to reconcile and check your payments. If you're not checking your payments, and that goes on for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a couple of years, that business is going to get in trouble. And that's why our country is in trouble. This has got to get fixed. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you. And if you want to support the channel and help me make even more videos, subscribe to the channel and become a paid member today.